we'd better do. And because they were all railwaymen, they dug a trench in the middle of this triangular of railway cottages at Tilbury. They dug this trench with it and they built it, covered it all with sleepers, and this was all unofficial. Well, unofficial in as much as there was no architect to it, and then they covered it all over the top with earth and everything else. So if there was going to be an air raid, we'd all get inside out in what we called the green. We got outside in the green and got in it. And we truly finished up in there. We were in there one night, there was an air raid and everybody piled up, and it was before the time when they come and give everybody an Anderson air raid shelter. And that was my first introduction to the war. Then of course everybody said, well, they're going to evacuate the children out the area. And I was evacuated to Devizes in Wiltshire with my sister. And like all families, after you've been down there about 2 weeks, Mum and Dad come down to see if you was all right, and I got evacuated with the Catholic school. Mum found me in a house called, what the house was, run by a family called Daniels, and I was flea bitten all over when my mother found me. She went up and examined the place where I was, and immediately was going to bring me back to London, where all the bombing had commenced. She went back to the nuns at Devizes in which she said, oh, we're taking him back, look at the state he's in. Anyway, with that I got a different accommodation, and I was put in an accommodation which was absolutely fabulous. The woman might have been an elderly lady, but she could have been an engineer. Everything was done right. Monday you had cornflakes, for lunch you had so-and-so. Then you had cheese and something else for tea at your finish. And she went through that then, and we all got our little jobs, go round the Devizes Wiltshire to the allotments, and she taught me how to grow things on the allotment. And there was a swimming pool there, we could go to a bit of swimming. Absolutely fabulous, and I think it was one of the finest things that happened to me. And of course after about 12 months we all got took back to London. Well, in our case, Tilbury. And we carried on. The house, and when I left the railway cottages, we lived in number 25. Number 25 got damaged. We were moved, or my parents were moved to number 27, so I returned number 27. And number 25 got taken over by the army. So that was the setup there. And once we'd returned then, we got back to school. And the war ticked away, and looked hard, all the things that happened. I used to have to do the shopping, and of course as it came to an end, and I got to be 14, and all my mates had got little jobs somewhere, and they're leaving school at 14. Just before I got to be 13, I went down to Beckley's in Tilbury. So is there any chance of a job? Who told you to come here? Well, I said, well, my mates have got jobs, Saturday jobs. All right, start here. Now, bearing in mind what the money was then, this Mrs. Beckley said to me, you can start here, you come down here every day after school, no hassle, but you'll be here after school then, and you'll be here Saturday, and for that we'll give you 10 shillings. 10 shillings was fabulous money, and I mean that. So I done that, and I stayed there, and I got to know all the other people, because as I got to move on and got up to 14 years of age, Mr. Beckley said, now I'm sorry, I'm going to have to tell you, you're going to have to go, we're going to have to dispense with your services, because under the regulations today, I can only employ certain men, and for me to keep you on, I've got to get rid of one of the men. Oh right, so I then took out the job. I was 14. I've now left school, looking for a job. My mother was working in the Southern Canteen in Tilbury Dock. This was all while the war was on. So she got me a little job in Tilbury Dock. I was doing nothing job in the canteen, and I think it was for £0.50 a week or something like that. The foreman come in the Southern Canteen, he said, what's your son doing then? She said, well, he's here trying to look while he's waiting for a job. So tell me, come down to the dry dock. Balfour Beatties are working in the dry dock, and they're working on the Mulberry Harbours. Do you know what the Mulberry Harbour is? It's a Mulberry Harbour big concrete box that they got all floats in. Anyway, once they made this concrete box, it floated, and they floated it across to, I'm told, Normandy, and they pushed it, it's built in the dry dock, and they pushed it up to the seaward side of the Norway coast, Norwegian coast, and then sunk it, and they've now got their pier, and that was built by Balfour Beaters, and I got a job as a carpenter, learning carpentry with them, and that I stayed there until they moved to London, and my old dad said, "You're not going to London." He wouldn't stand that. He'd be 15 years of age or 16. No, so I packed it up, come back to the depot, and I'm now out of work because the firm's moved to London. I went round and see if I could get a job on the railway, which I was in the railway colleges because my father was on the railway as an engineer in the engineering department. And I got this job. The woman said, "Yes, you start here Monday. You go to a medical, because they're very strict on the medical. You had to have perfect eyesight and all the other trimmings." And I had all them, you know. Being young, you didn't have any. You was good anyway, weren't you? So I stayed on there from when I joined the railway, which would be something like 1943 or 19 whatever, and I stayed on there till I retired. I became a train driver, all the lot, engine cleaner, fireman. The one thing I would like to say, and I've always said this, I went in the Air Force at 18 and stayed in the Air Force till I come out at 20 as a national service. When I come out at 20, my driver that I'd been with before I went in the Air Force, a bloke named Harris, or rather a man named Harris, he said, he was a diamond. You can't imagine a man who never swore, never raised his voice, and was never cross, and always there to tell you what you want to hear. And he said to me, "Now you're back, and you come back with me. From today onwards, and I'll never forget this, I'll do the firing one day, and you'll do it the next day. I'll do the driving one day, and you'll do the driving next day." And I was 20 years of age. And he stuck that out, and he done that every day, and consequently when I became 23, and I was going to be passed out for driving, I passed the driving exam with a cakewalk, because he'd already taught me. And I know the names of all the others that were with me. And I took the driver's job. I became a steam train driver until the 1960s when they done away with it. I was station supervisor at Tilbury Riverside when I give up the footplate, but I was driving electric. I give up the footplate and become a station supervisor. I thought, well, let's move away from here and get a few more bob. So I moved to Ripple Lane and become train crew supervisor at Ripple Lane with a uniform on and all that. But before I left Tilbury, I was called down on Tilbury landing stage. "Cyril, somebody would like to talk to you. Have you ever been on one of these cruises?" I said, "No, well, these Russian cruises go all around the Med." "No, how can I afford a Russian cruise?" He said, "Well, come with me, I want to take on it." He introduced me to this bloke, and he said, "Tell your wife you're on so-and-so, you'll be joining this cruise." He said, "You'll be a guest of the captain so-and-so." And that when I got on the ship on this particular trip, there was all the invitations to all the different parts. You could not believe how I got looked up. He said, "All we want you to do is to appear in uniform at the ship's quay, on the ship's side." I said, "Oh, right." And that's what I'd done. And I got down there with all the hat on, you know, and all the gimmicks. And he said, "Would you like to do that next year?" I said, "Would I?" He said, "No, I'd done it the following year, and we had 2 cruises. Then I moved to Ripple Lane and become the train crew supervisor from the London area, which was a much more lucrative thing for me. You know. And from that, I stayed there till I retired. They shut the depot in '93, and I qualified for the redundancy pay and all the rest of it. And here I am to tell the tale.